Perfect. So good morning, everybody. This is a lighthearted talk today. We've had a heavy couple of months, I think. Lots of things going on in the world. We're not going back to a new normal. There's amazing sort of things happening from this, though, in the way that, new innovation and new ideas are turning up all over the place, which is so exciting and kind of fun to see what's happening. You'll notice on the screen, I put this little flower show up there. I don't know if this is a real flower or somebody photoshopped it, but if this was a real flower, I would have it because it's red shoes, and I just think that's the most wonderful thing ever. So I'm all good with that. So what's turned into be our summer finally, from about a week ago when we had winter, it's a pleasure to be here on May 24th talking about advice from the garden. And this is really advice from our life garden. So we'll keep it lighthearted. We'll move into some metaphysics and enjoy a little discussion about what comes from Mother Nature. It's funny, Cheryl, that you should have thanked the garden team. I did the same thing, and we didn't really share our slides beforehand, but I wanted to thank our dearly departed Diane Everest. Diane left us a few years ago, and she was the one that actually started the first garden at the front, past just some regular flowers. She found indigenous flowers to be able to put in shrubs and plants that allowed us to have a perennial garden that came all the time. And everything was indigenous, and it has carried on there. So thank you to Diane, wherever she's looking down upon us. That's awesome. And of course, to our Unity Garden team now, which Cheryl earlier thanked, which I'm so grateful for, which is just absolutely awesome. I'm just hearing a little bit of feedback. I'm not sure if that's from something that I'm doing here. It's gone now, so I'm not sure if that's just from something turning on and off. So bear with me if we go through the slides and you hear that. So let's take a little bit of advice from our life garden. The first piece of advice is to plant 3 rows of peas. Peas of mind, peas of heart, and peas of soul. And I wonder sometimes when we look at that peace of mind and peace of heart, I wonder if sometimes we have to move to the peace of our soul to truly find this. This is where we get still. This is where we hear that spark of divinity within come and take over and know that all is well. As an amusing thing I saw in a Facebook meme a few months ago, this too shall pass whenever we're having a crisis. It may pass like a kidney stone, but this too shall pass. And the idea that when we're looking for peace of mind, a lot of times we have to look into our heart and then into our spiritual values, knowing that they don't come and go. They're there all the time. Like the first 2 unity principles, God is and I am, they are one and they are together when we're dealing with this. So having the planting of rows of peas, peas of mind, peas of heart, and peas of soul. The second set of rows of plants would be planting 3 rows of squash. What do we wish to squash? Let's squash envy. Let's squash anger. Let's squash ego. The idea that we can so easily turn to negativity. We'll often say in conversation that, often we're talking about other people. And the highest form of conversation is talking about new ideas in the big scheme of things. And as soon as we're involving somebody outside of the circle of speaking, we're often involving ego and often finding that we're talking about other people, which if they were in the circle, would we be talking about them anyway? And that's often about envy and ego. And of course, anger, we know, squashes our cells in our own body. As soon as we have a situation where we're dealing with anything negative, our cells actually physically change. And when we physically change to the not good, we are actually damaging ourselves. And a lot of our health will depend on the fact of how we can rise above envy, anger, and ego. We need our ego in some ways to be able to protect ourselves. It's there for a good reason. But if it takes over past the sort of spiritual body that we want to embrace and live in, we want to make sure that there's a fine balance there, that we look after ourselves, but we also go to our spark of divinity to always be looking for what is the higher way. It's Michelle Obama's saying, they go low, we go high. And we always want to take the higher road with everything. I remember Wayne Dyer, excuse me, Wayne Dyer, who a lot of you know and have read and listened to, talked about his children. I think he had 7 children. And when one child or 2 children came to complain about another child, he would say, well, what would you say if they were in the room? Or if I was that person, would you be saying the same thing to my face? So the idea that we can take the high road and always think of kindness in squashing envy, squashing anger, and squashing ego when it gets in the way. Our next set of rows is planting 4 rows of lettuce. Let us be generous. Let us be kind. Let us be grateful. And let us show love for one another. And isn't this true in times like this where we are slightly isolated? We can't hug each other, and that's tough for a lot of us Unity people because we really enjoy that. And the distancing we've had and the difficulties we've had in the world show us, to me, in the generous and kind and grateful way that we need to be. Some friends and I were talking yesterday by email. We would have been on a cruise a couple weeks ago and would have just come back, I think, last week. And it's so funny how the emails went. We were actually just checking in to see if people had gotten refunds and one thing and another. And the whole conversation turned into a conversation of caring and gratefulness, that we weren't on a cruise in all of this difficulty. We didn't get stranded anywhere. That we're all healthy. And luckily, we all share that our friends and family are healthy as well. And I don't know who any of the COVID stuff has affected, but I am sorry for anybody that's had any health challenges with that. We were showing our gratitude towards our healthcare system in Canada. I live part-time in the US, and I was really grateful to be home and know that I was totally looked after. That if something should happen to me or any of my friends or family, we could find healthcare, and it's universal and it's good for everyone. And we were certainly glad and be thankful for our government in the way that it's been trying to look after people, show some rules and restrictions, but only for the good of everybody's health and well-being. And everybody that's following that seems to be saying to me, it's okay. I'm grateful to have this kind of organization so I can look to a government that's allowing me to know the truth and being able to put us in a situation where we stay safe. And of course, when we look for love for one another, we're outreach. You know, the ones of us that can go to the store, for instance, often are buying things for other people that are shut in or maybe don't drive. We're making sure our neighbors are safe and happy. We're checking in with elderly parents or younger children that live outside of our house. Anybody that is needing that kind of care, I think a lot of the response is we're connecting in different ways than we used to. And aren't we grateful for our electronic systems? Because here we are sitting in all of our own houses, maybe in your pajamas, whatever way you want to join Zoom, you can. So it's such a great thing. And we're so grateful from Unity Kitchener that you are each and able to enjoy our time here together as well. It is a time of sharing and caring and kindness. And we're so glad that everybody's here to do that. So plant your 4 rows of lettuce. Planting 4 rows of time. Time for family. Time for friends. Time for self. Time for spiritual growth and meditation. And this is very important too. As again, we're in self-isolation, the time for family and friends is sometimes from afar. And that's okay. We're happy to be able to reach out in ways that we can that we wouldn't have years ago. We may have only had a telephone. It's interesting, I was reading a little synopsis over Facebook the other day. If you had been born in 1900, if you'd been born in 1900 at 14 years old, a world war would have started, and you may have indeed gone to that world war, depending on your age at the time. Then you went into an economic depression, and through the 1930s had an depression that just devastated people. And there really was not the government bailout that we would have had right now, and the economy that allowed us to be able to give people money. That's actually where the welfare system came from in North America. Then you came to what was called the Second World War, but the First World War had been the war to end all wars. And you came into that. So any young people that were born in the early part of the century were going off to war, and millions of people were killed to save our freedom. And luckily, we had freedom from that. Then we came into a time of flourishment, and for the most part, this was written from the American point of view, for the most part, we were in good times in the 50s, but then there was also a Cold War. So there was nuclear bomb threats. There was issues with air raids and having children practice at school to go underneath desks to be careful of any air raid situations in a nuclear attack. In the 60s, there was the Vietnam War that led into the 70s. And of course, we know what's happened from then on, especially from the American point of view, as they've had other wars in other parts of the world. So if we think about it, this small thing that has changed the world is not small in the sense of what it is, but maybe small comparatively what people have dealt with their whole life. Technically, if you've been born from 1950 onwards, we've lived pretty well in the big scheme of things. So this is just something to deal with. So take time for your family. Take time for your friends. It's important to share that. Also take time for yourself. Self-care is most important in these times. There are people that have a hard time being isolated. It's not that easy to do that. And this is sometimes where we can find that we go to our spiritual growth, and particularly when we get quiet with meditation, that we can find that we can draw on our reserves of spiritual knowing. Again, principles 1 and 2, God is and I am. You are never alone. You never have separation. There is always the factor that you can draw on the fact that our spiritual meditation and growth is always about knowing that you are never alone, always supported. And that divine spark within lives all the time. Even when it seems slightly diminished, and it can sometimes, it is not ever lights out. It is always there for light to see. And we think about shining a light and let others shine their light upon us. We know that the light, if you shine a light anywhere and you walk towards it, it just keeps on moving forward. So as we move towards light, there is always more light to be had. And that is our 4 rows of time. So look after yourself and the people around you, the people you care about the most, but also to look inside and know that that spiritual growth is there. And lastly, plant 4 rows of turnip. Turn up for service when needed. That might be this service or any service you can do with your friends and family. Turn up to help one another. Turn up with a smile. And turn up for life. I think one of the best things about this pandemic might be that we've figured out that life can change. We've slowed down a little bit. We've gotten introspective. Many people are working from home instead of going to the office, so avoiding traffic jams and delays every day, not having to pay attention to the weather to go outside because we're not getting into our cars and driving somewhere. For many people, this has changed the pace of life. Parents have become the teachers to their children in front of a classroom that's on the computer. I was just listening to CBC this morning, and a teacher was talking about the huge learning curve she's had, and she says is blessed with the huge learning curve she's had to be able to use her time to understand all the concepts of teaching students on the computer. So how to connect with them, how to download YouTube lessons, how to make sure they get to all the students, how to connect with each student personally, so she can understand where they're at with their lessons and checking in with them to make sure that they know that she or he is there with them. It makes a huge difference. And turning up with a smile just always makes somebody else's world better. Truthfully, we have more muscles in our face to have a frown than a smile. So if you're thinking about aging and thinking about wrinkles, smiles are better than frowns. Just a little mention to say that. And truly, we know that when we smile and we laugh, we let more endorphins, and these endorphins give us happiness within our life, and that helps our cells be more resilient to any kind of difficulty or health challenges. It says on the screen, let's have a great party and let us turn up the beat and have a dance party, perhaps in the garden. And just turning up for life means being a human being, not just a human doing. And maybe some of this idea of walking off the hamster treadmill of life is that we can make sure we are human beings. So being mindful, turning up when needed, helping one another, living with a smile, and really turning up and enjoying life, regardless of what the regular times that we're living in throw at us. It doesn't matter. We're in a good place. and we have good friends and good neighbors and good families. So turn up with a smile and turn up for life. I just wanted to sort of go back to unity for a minute and the idea of the metaphysics. One reason I was really drawn to unity was the fact that it used the Bible for parables and stories to work with and gave meanings to things that weren't the typical background. And I had always struggled with anything that came biblically that had to be looked at just as is. And I love the metaphysics. I'm not a metaphysics a scholar by any means, so I won't dwell on this for a long time. But just knowing that there is the Garden of Eden as a story in Genesis, as we know. The Garden of Eden is about the elemental life and intelligence place. It's at the disposal of all humankind. And it was undifferentiated bliss. So no matter what was there, it was totally a blissful place. So the place in our intelligence that is the disposal to humankind. Adam and Eve represent spiritual transformation, male and female, thinking and feeling. But they did say in the readings that I was looking at, it was like the male and female there were newborn babies. So the idea of unknowing yet, not being aware yet. At first we're naked, and that's how we're born. So until you know, you don't know. We can't actually unlearn anything. So once we learn something, we're past the point of being in a place where we don't know. The tree of knowledge is that state of dual consciousness, the understanding of both good and error in life. So I know one of those stories we've talked about before is when babies go to learn to walk, they may fall down. They don't fall down and say, well, I'm not doing that anymore. Forget that, I'm done. You know, babies push themselves. They learn to talk. They learn to eat with their own hands. They learn to be able to walk. So Adam and Eve are almost like the newborn babies that come to the tree of knowledge with that dual state of consciousness, releasing in their spiritual transformation, the unknowing that they did not have before, but knowing that they lived in the Garden of Eden with undifferentiated bliss. So they're able to move on to the more human or adult growth form that we understand both good and error. And from error can sometimes come good. The whole idea of learning life lessons is often the fact that we find something that might have been difficult or painful, and we learn a lesson from that, or we look back upon it and say, wow, if that hadn't happened, this good would not have come. I might not be in this place. I might not have changed something. It's very possible. They talk about the snake tempting Eve, and the snake is sense consciousness. I put in brackets gut feeling. It's the full knowing. It is the availability of knowing I must move on, the gut feeling to push ourselves forward, even when we have fear, and that's okay. And lastly, the apple represents humankind's physical incarnation. So once the apple was bitten into, we came into the physical form of humankind. And that's where that metaphysics of the Garden of Eden comes. We are all born into the unknowing. We don't know lives we had in the past. We may bring some knowledge with us, but we don't know what that is. And we may move into the ethers at some other point past this life and take on a new form with new lessons to have. But knowing that we always can move back to the Garden of Eden in that first place of bliss and take our lessons as both good and error as we move through life. One of my favorite heroes is Audrey Hepburn. And Audrey Hepburn said, plant a garden. To plant a garden is to believe in tomorrow. A garden always gives us hope. My grandmother was quite a gardener, and I never really have been, but it's interesting. Just this year, I decided, I think I should garden some. And I think a lot of us have turned to that in these times of thinking about, well, what can I do in this time? There's a bit of downtime going on for some people. We're looking outside, we're thinking about the food chain and how that might be interrupted. And many of us are turning to some gardening to think, I should grow some of my own things. So just yesterday, I started sort of preparing a garden. I thought it was kind of interesting that, thanks Trish, that a lot of people were very anxious for garden centers to open really early, and yet it was still almost winter time, but it's because people were a little bit bored. They wanted something to do. So don't plant till this weekend or later. My sister's mother-in-law always said she would never plant till June 2nd, and she's an avid gardener as well. But there was apparently a frost one time on June 1st, and she lost all of the plants she put in. So her mantra is June 2nd for planting. But really, when we plant, we know that energy comes into that. We can't see that energy. We can only feel that energy. And we know that to plant a garden, whether it's a garden of life or the garden of plants, is to plant something with hope. And with hope, then it becomes to a flourishment that we can't always see. We don't know how the energy is moving. But in all cases, something is transforming and changes, even when we can't see it because it's below the ground, that when it becomes above the ground, of course, the transformation has already occurred. And all of that has gone on till we see more transformation, and we come to the bloom or the fruit or the vegetable that comes out to be something from a flower that we can see. So to plant a garden is to believe in tomorrow. And finally, just a few reminders from Mother Nature. First of all, be like the sunflower. The sunflower always follows the sun. If you watch a field of sunflowers, it will be at the east in the morning, turn its way through the sun overhead, and face at the west when the sun is going down. But sometime in the night, the sunflowers also turn back to the east. Nobody says to do that. Nobody's told them go back over here. They always believe the sun will rise tomorrow. And they always look towards the east. In fact, I was reading yesterday that when the sunflowers get a little older and more rigid in their stalks and they can't move as easily, they will stick with staying to the east because they know the sun will always come up and shine upon them. So it's kind of a fun way to know that nature looks after itself in that way. But be like a sunflower. Always turn towards the sun. Secondly, another reminder from Mother Nature, don't take away the dandelions. The dandelions are the bees' first food. And I saw several of you's faces I can see right now post some great things on Facebook about that this week. That the rule is the honeybees need the dandelions. Also, dandelions are food for us too. We can use the leaves, we can use the flowers, it's quite amazing. But the idea that the bees are the one thing that tends to pollinate the most of our flowers, fruits, and vegetables. And honeybees actually travel 8,000 kilometers every 4 to 6 weeks. And they pollinate 50,000 plants about once a month. It's just amazing what that little bee can do. Of course, they live in thousands in hives. My dad was a beekeeper, and he always said that that was a hobby of his. And he said he loved being with the bees because they were actually very calm. Once you were at one with them, they wouldn't sting. You know, you had a net on and things like that, but you didn't worry about the bees stinging you anymore. You were at one with them. They knew how to run their hive. They knew how to do everything from inside. But what they do is pollinate all of our food. And if we don't have honeybees, we don't have food. I think it was Albert Einstein who said, watch where the bees are. That's what's going to happen to human beings. And we have to make sure that we keep our honeybees very, very healthy. Turn off the news and get into the garden. One of my other mentors, Mary Morrissey, says, turn off CNN, constantly negative news. Move away from the negative things. You can always find them. Move to the Discovery Channel. That's her saying. I think moving to the Discovery Channel, we can actually take that metaphorically to move into the garden. Go back to the dirt. Go back to the ground. Go back to the nature part. Go see the beauty that's out there rather than sitting inside and watching our news channels all the time, which are 24/7 and they're all saying the same thing. So for 5 minutes a day or so, if you want to do that, that's great. Get all your news and updates, but maybe go out into nature, especially with the good weather we're going to enjoy for the next few months. Make sure you touch the earth. There's a saying that says, if you're having a difficult day or in a bit of a bad mood, take your shoes off and go out and touch the earth. There's a magnetic force that we know is gravity, but also comes up through the earth, through our feet, and through ourselves. If you're having any discombobulation in life, anything that makes you feel uncomfortable, or if you just want to feel grounded, the word grounded is self-explanatory. Touch the earth with our feet. That's how we get back into nature. and we make sure that our cells are totally aligned. In fact, when they measure cells and the change in cells when we change from an inside space to an outside space, it's very interesting how the cells actually change the closer we are to nature and the more that we touch the earth. So make sure you touch the earth. And lastly, the definition of faith to me. The birds start to sing before the sun rises. If you can ever go out between 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning before any sunrise occurs, you'll hear birds start. And the birds will start chirping, and the songs will start singing, and there's quite a cacophony outside. It's quite beautiful. Wayne Dyer used to say, get up between 3 and 4 in the morning, it's a magical hour. Life changes from dark to light, and also from silence, for the most part, to everything starting to rise. The definition of faith to me is the birds start singing before the sun rises. Take that into account, and if you're able to go outside when it's still dark, do that sometime because it's a beautiful sound. And finally, just a note to say, we come from the earth, we return to the earth, and in between we garden. Thank you very, very much for today. And now we go to meditation. Thank you, Trish. And thank you for all the songs of today. They've been perfect. Let's move us into a time of inner reflection, tending to our own garden of life. Take just a few minutes to relax. Gently close your eyes if that's comfortable, and scan your body for any areas of tension. Relax shoulders. Make sure you're comfortable in your chair and know that you're fully supported. And as you take a deep breath in, breathe in love. Exhale peace. Envision the garden of your life. Walk down the path of the garden, drinking in the smell of the earth beneath your feet. Envision yourself barefoot, totally connected to the earth, and feeling grounded, both physically and spiritually. As you look around, witness all that surrounds you, the fruits of your life, the garden that feeds your mind, body, and soul, and the trees that create a canopy of mottled shade through which the sun is shining. With another deep breath, smell the fragrances of the many flowers of the garden of life, the fragrance of friendship and harmony, the fragrance of peace and prosperity, the fragrance of joy and happiness. Pay attention to anything that crosses our mind that is not serving us. There are always some weeds to tend. Gently pull them up from the garden of life and bless them. Each weed represents a lesson we have already learned, and we are able now to release and remove from our garden of life. As we continue to walk through our garden, consider each of the creatures that are in our garden. They may appear as butterflies and honeybees and hummingbirds. Each represents someone important in our lives that is here to help us on our life journey with love, with tenderness, and with compassion. For just a moment, let's find a quiet place to sit in our garden, drink in the view, and enjoy tending your garden of life in the silence. As we gently return to the here and now, remember the same energy that allows the acorn to grow into the mighty oak tree, allows the dandelion to grow between the sidewalk cracks. Give a gentle thank you to Mother Earth for this beautiful garden we call life. Thank you, Divine Spirit, for being our co-creator in this garden of life. We come from the earth, we return to the earth, and in between we tend our garden, our sweet garden of life. For this or something better, we say thank you, thank you, thank you. And so it is.
Lead me to the light. Lead me to the light. Help me to make it through. Lead me into the light. Make my eyes to see all that I can be. Help me to see it through. Lead me into the light. Turn my mind today. Take your hurt away. Help me to be with you. Lead me into the light.
Wow, Marilyn, that was